Lisa Nandy.
Yeah, I came to this debate as much to listen as to contribute, and I was very glad to follow the member for Bishop Auckland, who, in a very rare way in these debates over the last few years, has actually set out a way in which we might move forwards that may not be comfortable for her, may not all be her preferred option, but shows a willingness to listen and to compromise and to move, which has been pretty absent, if we're honest, from this debate so far. The attitudes out there in the country are hardening. Constituents of mine who told me 3 years ago that they'd voted leave and they were happy to leave on whatever terms Parliament deemed necessary as long as we respected the result, are now telling me daily they want to cut all ties and leave with no deal at all. And constituents who voted to remain, who said that we'd had the debate, that the other side had won fair and square and we just had to get on with it, are now telling me they want to halt this process altogether and remain in the EU. And I have to say that, having spent a lot of time with colleagues trying to find a way through this in here and behind the scenes over the last few weeks, I feel exactly the same thing is happening in Parliament as well. And if we don't start to move, they won't start to move, and there is absolutely no prospect of repairing this country. That's why I very much welcome what the member for West Dorset has done with this amendment today, and particularly the way in which he presented it. He is not seeking to control the outcome of this process. He is not seeking to do, as many colleagues on each extreme of this debate have done for several years, which is to knock out any preferred option that isn't theirs and undermine any of us who are trying to find a solution to this by questioning our good faith and our intentions and our motives. And let me just say this too, that as somebody who represents a constituency where 2/3 of people voted to leave and did so largely in full knowledge of what they were doing and still feel strongly about it, but where 1/3 of people also voted to remain and have every bit as right to a stake in the future of this country as the rest, I have to say that that bad faith is operating on both sides of this debate, that those threats and the abuse are coming from both sides. I and many honourable members face it daily, and to seek to pretend, as some members did just now in this debate, that it only comes from one side is just quite simply not true. It's insulting and it will not stick. And I have to say that I'm very dismayed today about the government's position. I don't think that government ministers understand how little trust there is left. And as we stand here in this chamber right now, according to the lobby, according to journalists who are briefing things out over social media, the government is sitting in closed rooms trying to persuade members of their own side to vote down this amendment in order, in favour of guarantees. We have been here before, Mr. Speaker. Time and time again, they come to this dispatch box, they tell us they're serious, they tell us they're listening, they tell us that the House must make a decision, and then when we get up and we speak with one voice about what we want, they say, OK, we'll go away and think about it, they make some promises, they pick off members of their own side, and then lo and behold, where are those promises when they most count? They're nowhere to be seen. What is wrong, honestly, given the mess that has been created in this country? What is wrong with giving Parliament the right to consider the options that we want to put forward? We speak for very, very different communities in this country, and when you seek to deny us a voice, you're not denying me a voice. Who cares whether I have a voice? You're denying the 75,000 people that I represent in Wigan a voice, and all of the other honourable members besides. And I would say to both front benches that if we are going to consider those options in good faith, given the very different needs and priorities of those constituencies, there has to be a free vote offered on those options. I understand the discomfort. I've served in the Shadow Cabinet myself. It's not an easy thing to do, but where you have this strength of feeling and these very divergent views and experiences across the country, all of those have to be heard if we're going to find a way through this. And I'll just say to ministers too that trust isn't just now almost entirely absent, the goodwill is almost entirely absent. Last week, I couldn't believe what I was seeing when the Prime Minister took to the steps of Downing Street and tried to pit the people against Parliament. The public follow our lead. When we stand in here using language like betrayal and traitors, is it any surprise that we step outside and find that same language levelled back at us? If she wants to restore goodwill, the first thing she must do is apologise to members of this House, who are all, in our very different ways positions, trying to find a way through this in good faith, and she must rule out no deal. We will not believe she is serious about the interests of the country if she doesn't. Why? The Minister is asking me why. Why? Because last week I had a constituent on the phone whose son was in line for a clinical trial that could save his life in the European Union, that doesn't know now whether he would get it. This is a child who has no certainty about what is going to happen next. I have a constituent who's on dialysis who rang me to say she's been told to wait for some disruption in the event of no deal. When I went to the Minister to ask what the advice was, he said, we're doing our best, but we can't make any guarantees. My sister is diabetic and hasn't slept for months because she doesn't know whether she'll be able to access insulin. Now, you can accuse me of scaremongering all you like, but the government's own technical notice cannot tell us what will happen in the event of a no-deal Brexit. What sort of government cannot guarantee access to medicines for its citizens in just a week's time? I will.
You make the point gently to the honourable lady that there was a written ministerial statement that did make those guarantees only 3 weeks ago.
Remember that I was here on Monday when we were debating plans to allow pharmacists to limit access to medication in the event of no deal in just a few weeks' time. And you know, I went to my local pharmacist and had a conversation with him a couple of days later, and he'd never heard anything about it. So to pretend that this is a responsible course of action, frankly, it's a disgrace. And he can roll his eyes at me all he likes, but this is an absolute disgrace. They have driven this country to a brink, and they are not learning, and every member sitting in this House right now will look at that minister sitting on that bench and realise that this is a government that is not serious about safeguarding the welfare of its citizens. And I'll just say, I'll finish with this because I know that there are many members who are desperate to speak. In the next stages, if we get to the next stages, if this shabby government somehow manages to cobble together a majority for the withdrawal agreement and get us into the next stages, I would just say to honourable members, look at what you've just witnessed in this House. Do not trust that they are acting with the interests of the whole country in mind. This House has got no guaranteed role in those next stages of negotiations. If we do not insist on that right now, we will not get it. For 4 months I've been talking to the Prime Minister and to members of the government side about giving Parliament the right to set out the terms of the negotiating mandate in the next stages and to guarantee a vote about the future relationship at the end of that process. They have resisted that, and that is why my honourable friend and I, the member for Stoke Central, will be bringing forward an amendment when this meaningful vote materialises, because we have got to have a reset. If we are going to get to the next stages of those discussions, then that discussion has to involve every single part of this House. We cannot allow the Prime Minister, whoever he or she may be by that point, to go off and negotiate away our rights and our freedoms and our protections that have been hard fought for 100 years without any say in what that is. Mr Speaker, this has become a tug of war between two groups of people, actually, that when I speak to them every day in my constituency are quite reasonable people who would like to see this resolved. We are breaking our democracy, and that is why I commend the honourable member, the member for West Dorset, for Amendment A, because he is seeking a way to come together and compromise and find a way through this impasse. And we as a House have to rise to the occasion, because, my God, I have just seen a perfect example from the government benches that they are simply not going to do it.